Welcome guys to our freight market update for the coming month of June. My name is Gregor Manatidis. I am the Director of Marketing here at Navia. I am with our Head of Ocean Product, Yannis Papantimos, for another update for you guys. So we'll start off, as we usually do, with capacity and space. So talking about the supply side of freight. We'll start with the ocean freight side. Yannis, as we have spoken about before, we have a traffic light system where red means things are at less than 30% of what is typically available. 30 to 70% is orange, and then a green means that there is more than 70% of the typical capacity. Let's start on China into Australia specifically. What are we looking at in terms of the traffic light?
Well, the most, interesting part on the Asia to Oceania trade is that a lot of blank sailings have been announced.
Yep.
So I guess we're looking at a yellow color.
Yellow, okay, yep.
At this stage, and we'll see how the next weeks are going to go, mainly because the capacity out of Asia into Oceania is going to or might be impacted of what is happening on the TP eastbound trade.
Okay, so yellow for the moment, and it might change halfway through the month depending on what happens with the US.
I'm assuming that our next update is going to be quite interesting.
Okay, all right. So that's China into Australia and New Zealand. Now, for our customers based in America, what's happening on that lane in terms of capacity?
Red, and then red again.
Okay.
At this stage, it's very challenging situation, mainly because of what we are all aware in terms of the tariffs that have been imposed.
Yep.
So consequently, there is a lot of demand.
Yep.
And the carriers still have not caught up on the capacity side.
Okay, so plenty of demand. Our carriers are trying to add in more vessels and availability to that lane, but that's not caught up yet with the demand. Okay, we'll come back to that later in the piece. So now let's look to Europe. Last time we spoke, that was a red. There was lots of congestion. I think you mentioned strikes, if I'm not mistaken.
Unfortunately, the situation is pretty much the same. Not much have changed. And we're talking red colors mainly because of the congestion.
Okay.
Europe as a whole is quite congested.
Yep.
So as a result, capacity has been out of the market.
Okay. And which ports is that, out of curiosity?
Unfortunately, the thing with congestion is that it is contagious.
Everywhere.
So basically, it started out of the major North European ports.
Rotterdam.
Bremerhaven, Rotterdam, Hamburg, Antwerp.
Yep.
But then we're also experiencing some issues on the South/Mediterranean side of things.
Okay.
So
that's a flow-on effect.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Now, moving on to, I'll touch on Airfreight. Was discussing with Alana, who is our head of Airfreight product. She was saying that as a result of the tariff pause, there was a little bit of a surge in demand. However, because what happened was before the tariff pause, there were freighters and basically capacity moved elsewhere in the airline's network. There's now not as much capacity available. So we're having high demand, increase in rates, capacity being taken elsewhere, and essentially that's pretty much red to both America and to Australia and New Zealand out of China. So yeah, not much space there. UK and Europe is fine. The advice that I've gotten from her is that there is, on the Australia trade specifically, 2 weeks before you can get uplift of your freight at the moment as it stands. So going on to advice, let's touch back on the US. You mentioned there that things might change. I'm a supply chain manager. Tell me what might play out in June. What should I be looking out for?
Well, the most important thing that the supply chain managers need to be aware for the coming month, and the focus should be on whether the announced GRIs from most carriers are going to stick or not.
Yep.
The consensus and
what is announced, by the way? What are the announced GRIs?
Anywhere between 500, 1,000 to maybe 1,500 per TEU.
That's in
so
the US.
Yeah, that's Asia into US. So we might be looking at an additional ocean freight of $3,000 for a 40 foot.
Or a 40 foot. Okay. And whether they stick or not? remains to
That
be seen.
remains to be seen. The general sentiment is that because demand is quite high, and at the same time the capacity that the carriers are putting back on the TP trade has not yet caught up with the demand, it is expected that the GRIs will stick. Remains to be seen what percentage of it.
Okay. And what about on the Oceania trade? What's the GRI there?
That's a whole different story. What we have already seen, it's currently a very mixed bag. For the first half of June, we have seen carriers reducing the rates.
Yep.
We have seen carriers increasing the rates, and there are other carriers who have kept the rates flat.
Okay.
So that's obviously based on each carrier's perspective of the market, how their vessel utilization is looking. However, again, the sentiment is that from the 15th of June and forth, all carriers have announced GRIs, and we do expect those to stick to a certain percentage or to the full extent of it, depending again of what we're going to see capacity-wise. Because as an example, some extra loaders that were supposed to come into Oceania out of China have moved to the TP trade.
Okay.
As such, capacity is not that much, so this is why we have seen some GRIs stick. We have seen a small increase of the FAK, and that could also mean that from the 15th of June and forth, the FAK rates will go higher.
Okay. But not to the same extent as the US.
No. Well,
Probably a couple $100, few $100, something like that.
maybe around US $300 per TEU max.
Yep. Okay.
At this stage, at least.
Awesome. That's you heard it here first from the Men in Black. You heard it here. Thanks for that, Yardi. Really appreciate that. We will be back next month with what we anticipate, by the sounds of it, will be an interesting update. So stay tuned.